Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show to talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Lost in Space Season 3, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Judy's side of things, as she ends up finding the lender. So she goes in and finds her dad, which maybe they had casted him last season when they showed all pictures of him. I didn't remember. I don't think they showed anything off. I think she just talked about him because she's referencing it in this episode. But I did not realize. And I was like, oh, it's Russell Hornsby, which I know him best as Hank from Grimm. But a number of things. Lincoln Rhyme. God, what was there? There was a show where he was a police officer. It was like Lincoln something. I don't remember the... Oh, I'm blanking on the show right now, but the thing I best know him for him is Grimm. But it's just interesting. I was like, oh, I didn't know they were going to cast him as her dad. That's dope. But the life support thing of like trying to bring them out of stasis didn't work. So luckily she was able to kind of make a makeshift defibrillator and resuscitate him, luckily. But can't wake anyone else up. Obviously she has to like drop a whole bunch of information on him all at once. Being like, yeah, it's been 20 years. This wasn't technically a rescue mission. We just happened to find you. I'm the captain. Yeah, I know I'm pretty young. My crew's of 97 people. Well, how'd you get here? A robot. And he was like, oh. So I don't know if he explained to her, like, what happened to the Fortuna just because, well, we know he had to run in with the robot. So it's very much kind of like the same thing with the, Resolute. They had their run in with the robot. But most of the people didn't know about what was going on there in that regard, So, like, not everyone knew. Like, the Robinsons had no idea about that at the time. Only select people knew, like Smith, for example, because she actually saw the robot when it was doing its attacking on the Resolute. But... So, obviously, it's a point in the conversation where he was like, right, maybe we shouldn't have any maybe you should kind of ease up on how much you're telling me. And she's like, right, because she was hesitant to tell him, like, oh, you're my dad. Like, it's like, I guess she just felt awkward about dropping that because it's like, right, because she doesn't know how he'll react. Also, because it's like, right, you're just waking out of stasis. You've been going for like 20 years. Everyone on Earth thinks you're dead. She even just said, like, oh, you're like a hero. Like, I even did a report on you. He's like, yeah, so you're pretty, like, well known on Earth. And so... she had asked, like, oh, was there anything that you left behind? And at first I thought she was going to be heartbroken when he was, like, referencing, like, some Rocky Road ice cream or something like that. And she just kind of chuckles. But I'm like, right, based on the conversation later on, it turns out, like, he didn't know she existed. Like, he had left Maureen behind, but he also talked about missing his mom because he's like, right, my mom would be about 80 now. But essentially, they... take, I guess, what is essentially like a 20-year-old version of the chariots. It looks like it is one, just like the older model, just like he's wearing a very classic astronaut uniform. And he's like, oh, these used to be kind of, in back in the day. She's like, no, it still kind of is. Like, she just brings up, like, Will dressing like that for, like, Halloween one time or something like that. But they kind of go out, and trying to make their way back to the campment. But in the process... pieces of meteor start like laying down around them, so they're having to dodge that, plus like the shockwaves from them. At the same time, one of the pods is about to fall off. It turns out that one of the people in the pods is connected to the body that the person that Judy found at the beginning of episode 1. I think that's who he was referencing at the time. It's like they, like you spend so much time together on a mission like this, you're bound to get close. So that's kind of sad news. But that one of the pods was about to fall off, but luckily Judy... I almost look at it as like this inverse of season 2 with the fuel and everything. When the truck had landed on Home Dude and like, because he was trying to like attach a cord, it kind of reminded me of that. Like, obviously this is the more positive side of like things working out, that Judy was able to get back in her seat and buckle in, and luckily it was passed over. So it's like, cool. But obviously, you have Grant bringing up the fact is like, right, your campment's like down there, like we have no way. But Judy's like, if there's always a solution. He's like, what'd you just say? She's like, yeah, it's just something my mom used to say all the time. He's like, yeah, I knew someone that used to say that. And she starts kind of roundabout saying like all this stuff about like, right, the only reason why I chose you for my report And it's like, yeah, that mother of your mom, she was there that day, and kind of, and finally, gets to the point of like, yeah, I always wondered what he'd think if I met him. And he said, and, he's tearing up like with him because he didn't know she existed. It's like, I didn't, and it's like, he's like, I thought it was beautiful where he was just like, I think he'd say, nice to meet you. And she's like, it's nice to meet you too. And they shake hands. I'm like, that's actually pretty dope, I like that. It's like, because I love that she was like, she never referred to him as father because the role was already filled at the time. But, I just like, it is pretty dope. I think she's very lucky because he'd even ask like, oh, like, hey, he learned his driving from his mom. And it's like, oh, who'd you learn to be brave from? And she's like, my dad. And I think both could be applicable. But, it's like, yeah, like, I think in that instance, she was more so referencing, John, because John is her dad in her eyes, because Grant's the father she never knew. She heard stories about him and stuff like that. Like, Maureen had told her, like, right, your dad, he gave his life to space, but he gave me a lot more. And I was like, that's super beautiful. And for it to be like the revelation like that, like, she's like, I know you didn't want a lot thrown at you, but, here's this bit of a curveball. And it's like, that's pretty dope. I'm glad that things worked out. Now, obviously, like, he's excited. Like, oh my God, like, I have a daughter I didn't even know about. Because it's an opportunity for them to kind of catch up and everything. He gets to know her. Like, I mean, she's like, what has your life been? Like, has things been good? Like, oh, how's your mom? So I'm sure stuff like that's going to come up. So there's that angle of it. Back with the adults, we have Maureen and John and Dawn going down to the planet because we need a robot, right? So let's find the robot. I was like, what robot are they going to be looking for? They're looking for SAR, because the last time we know, because it's the robot, she knows where it is. It's like her plan is to find SAR because we know SAR is dead because Ben killed him last season. So it's like, right, we just got to go there, resuscitate him, which Don's not too happy about the plan because he's like, no, this could easily go sideways, because it's like, what was it? Maureen had referred to the thing, like this whole situation as immountable, and Don was like, oh, so you're making it mountable. He's like, that was a lot dirtier than I meant it to be. But he's like saying like, Admiral Don West, you're not an Admiral, Don. Brigadier Don West, no. But he's just super against this plan because, like, he's like, I know that you Robinsons kind of go fly by the seat of your pants, but like, let's think just on a possibility that things don't work out and this thing tries to kill us. Luckily, they have the weaponry needed to kill it if need, or at least kind of bend it to their will like they did before. Like that was used to pilot the Resolute and stuff like that. They were using on Scarecrow and try to use on Robot. It's like, we'll get you use that to make the robot kind of go where we want it to be. But I was kind of scared for Dawn and John when things started kind of going down. I was like, oh, they actually kind of subvert your expectations because you expect things to kind of go bad, but it's like, no, they just kind of got lost a little bit, but they found each other in the storm and stuff like that's making things staticky. But yeah, they find where SAR's body's supposed to be, and it's like, he's not there, and you're like, interesting. And obviously Maureen's worried the most because it's like, okay, we'll find another robot. But it's like, no, SAR being alive is a bad thing because they know Will's name. Just like Will's come to that realization. And even Penny, which we'll get to later, came to that realization about them knowing Will's name and how dangerous that is. And so she's worried because it's like, they already don't know if these kids are okay. They want to believe it, but they need some reassurances. But by the time they get back to the Jupiter, there's already marks up there. So it's like, wait, John's like, were those here already? And it's like, nope. Because there's a robot aboard. And at first I'm like, is it SAR? Like, did he sneak aboard the Jupiter and stuff like that? So as they're kind of dealing with that, because John's like, this may be our only opportunity to, it's like, it's just like Maureen said, and Don's like, your wife has a lot of crazy ideas, and you see her in the background hitting him. He's almost like, what? You do? But it's like, yeah, John's like, this might be our one opportunity. We need a robot, then this might be our only opportunity, considering he's on loan right now, So at the same time, this is all happening, Will is dealing with the fact that the robot's going, and, you have Smith asking him, like, where did the robot go? Like, because usually he wanders off, but usually not for this long, so Will's kind of a little worried, but it's like, yeah, there's nothing on this planet that could really hurt him, but it still has our worry, Smith worry, which, once again, I talk about it, watching this episode, looking at Smith, I'm like, I get giddy, because like I talk about it, it's like, honestly, the first two seasons, I get like, I have such a love-hate relationship with her. It's weird because like her now kind of makes, because it's already out in the open how slimy and manipulative she can be sometimes, but it's also, like I said, she has good sides to her too. So just, I'm like, I hate you so much, but I also love you so much, Smith, because like just how, like the line she says in this episode, just like, oh yeah, I followed you all the way out here, but if I'd known it was such a trek, I wouldn't have, you know? Because basically Penny and Liam ended up stumbling across, like, she leaned against the wall and her hair started getting staticky. And I love that Smith was like, oh, me and your mom discovered it. If that's here, that means there's a sign of alien technology. We know that. It's like, we didn't need you to come out here. Except, you know? But Will decides, well, we need to go in, and even, Penny decides to go in too, which she has her reservations. But I think it's interesting because the whole conversation came up about like Smith is the one like holding on to the line of like that way they can find their way out of like the cave system. I think it's so interesting because at first I was like, because you never know what's 100% truthful and how much is a lie anytime Smith like brings up something about herself. She's like, you know, as a Girl Scout, it's like, wait, you were a Girl Scout? She's like, I know it's hard to believe. It's like, that's the thing, like, we know bits and pieces about Smith's past, but we haven't really dived into it too much. Probably what we've gotten is probably all we'll ever get, maybe, over the course of the series, but I think it's just so interesting. But I don't see her lying about it. You know, she still never goes by her real name. They just refer to her as Dr. Smith. Maybe eventually in the series, she'll be like, okay, you can call me June. What? Yeah, that's my real name. Like, she's still going by, well, to be fair, she can't give up her identity because she went through the trouble last season of clearing her name and making this identity stick. So there's no like going against it. So she has no reason to lie. So she probably just makes a lot of stuff that she tells about herself being like, oh, it's applicable to Dr. Smith and not necessarily June Harris, you know? So I think that's probably the thinking behind it. Because that's why I'm like, I don't see her having a reason to lie. I was thinking, though, it's like, oh, she's offering to be like back here with the wire. I'm like, you really trust her to be leading you out of the forest with the breadcrumbs? You know, using a metaphor in that regard, but I love that Penny was like, well, if you're a Girl Scout, do you have any mint cookies? And she's telling Will, like, you know, cookies ease me and make me not as nervous. And I was like, I thought it was specifically Oreos, but I guess you're just a cookie person all in general. But, so that's interesting to know. Like, I thought would make, you know, because you could like very specific cookies and not. Because so apparently she like, obviously we know she likes Oreos and she likes Thin Mints. So that's interesting. It's also a little crazy to think about, too, and just, I get too much in my own head about it, just thinking about it. It's like, it's just funny because, like, in between seasons, she's been on 2 seasons of Legends of Tomorrow, so that's why I think it's so interesting. In between, like, season 2 of this and season 3, like, she was a recurring character here and there in, 2 seasons of, like, season 5, I think, is when she was first introduced, and obviously she made some appearances here and there in season 6, so just interesting. But when they get pretty deep in the cave, the door just miraculously closes behind them, so they're kind of stuck. And I love that Smith is kind of worried for a second, and she's like, Will, Penny, if you want me to stay out here where it's safe, say nothing. It's one of those ones like, oh, I hate you, but I love you so much, Dr. Smith. I love it. You're so, it makes me feel so conflicted. I think this is going to be the season, like I said, like, I flip-flopped last season. Season 1, I was just like, oh, I don't like, in the sense of, like, oh, you're this villainous character and I don't like you. Not, you know, it's that type of thing of, like, oh, I hate this character because you're so evil, you're so manipulative. And once again, she bounced back and forth because I felt a lot more sympathetic for her in season 2. I think that was kind of the point. Especially because she tried to be good a lot more in season 2. And I mean, it's the beginning of the season, but I don't see her, especially now that she's kind of gotten everything she wants. She did bring up the fact, though, like, if Judy's all saving someone, she feels a little complicated about that because she's like, right, I'm already on board. That's already going to adjust the air situation on the Jupiter. We get a few pilots and astronauts from the Fortuna, like, that's more people, so the air's not going to last as long. But Will's like, let's worry about getting off the planet first before we even worry about, like, who's going to be on board and stuff like that. So, but Will and Penny have this interesting conversation where it's like he sees some prints that seem like they could belong to a robot. So it's like there could be another alien robot here. And so Penny's kind of worried because Will's saying like, nah, because these prints could be here for a while. But then Penny was like, we both know they know your name, Will. Like, you out of anyone could be in danger. So tell me the truth. Like, is it possible that those are a lot fresher? And he's like, yes, it's a possibility. Because he was probably hoping that he was the only one that really thought about that. I don't think Judy's come to the same conclusion, but Penny's kind of jumped on it pretty quickly of like, yeah, like what Will was already worried about, what he's been thinking about, like she's already thought of that too. Because I think out of anyone in the family, she's kind of the biggest worry wart. Just because like, well, Judy, like both Judy and Will, I think both have a hard, both try to be a lot braver and try to handle a lot of stuff on their own. And so Penny kind of has to be the one that kind of anchors both of them, I think, to some extent, to be like, it's okay, like, to like, you know, because she even asked, because like, she's like, how are you not so afraid? Because she's like, I'm the older sister, like, I'm kind of sucking at my job because I'm supposed to comfort you. And he comes over and hugs her, and she's like, how are you not scared? He's like, who says I'm not? She's like, then why won't you tell us that? You know, because once again, they haven't been talking. We don't know at what point during this past nearly year that they haven't really been talking, you know? But luckily, Smith came in and she saved him. She's like, hey, I made sure not to come here without a weapon, but it's like, yeah, you decided to show up. Because it's like, if you try to pretend, like, obviously it wouldn't go your way, because, well, first and foremost, they need the robot to use the engine so they can actually leave. So there's that. But also she knows, like, yeah, they'll be hell to pay. Like, the Robinsons are kind of like my number one fans. I mean, the other children are probably warmed up to her too, as well as, you know, being a teacher and everything. But the robot shows up and he wants to show them something. And it turns out they found where he was made, because Will had figured out that the marks he saw, they're not from a rope, they weren't from metal, it was from something organic. So now we're getting into the nitty gritty of like because I was like, whoa, I was like, this is the final season, and are we really gonna jump into like making it like introducing another alien species? It's like, yes, but that species is extinct. So all the species that the ones who made them, and that must mean that the robots must be made in their likeness, because they have that same thing with their feet. But like I said, like but Will pointed out like the organic aspect of it, like it not being metal, but they must be like, the original species must have made the robots potentially as like reflections of themselves. Like maybe their species was dying out and they wanted their species to kind of live on in some, you know, it's kind of like, you know, people wanting immortality, so they get like robotic and want to be turned into like androids and stuff like that. So maybe there's some aspect of that to it. But I thought it was interesting because there was a whole conversation that came up about programming, you know, because like because essentially it's like, right, the robots, the people who made the robot are gone, and Penny was like, does it make you sad? And then, you know, putting her own perspective in things, you know, it's like, and that speaks volumes. It's like, just because someone's your parent doesn't mean you have to be sad that they're gone, you know? Sometimes you're better off, you know? And it's like, kind of like, wow. And she's like, well, not all of us are lucky to have John and Maureen Robinson, you know, because she believes like some of us are just like the way we're programmed, like that's all there is to it. There's no like really changing from that. But then Will's like, no, but look at the robot. Look how much he changed. And even look at you. She's like, oh, that's sweet. But at the end of the day, it's like, she just thinks like you're kind of who you are is who you are, like through and through. There's no real changing that. But the robot comes and shows them something, and he basically shows them the danger system, and then he zooms in to the planet and shows like, hey, there's the Jupiter 2. And just as the robot situation is going down the way it is on the ship, because they plan on trapping him and everything, in that moment, like, it's like, help family, Will Robinson. And he's like, I'm trying, and he speaks, and something on the robot activates, and it communicates through the robot, because it turns out this is Scarecrow, who I was just asking about last episode. And it's like, no, it luckily works out, because now it's like a two-way communicator between the robots, and you're like, right, so this is what makes Will special. Once again, I think it's the robots want to kill him because he can change things. He can change them from their programming. It seems like to be the main staple of what this season is going to be about. But he can change things for them. He already changed Robot. He changed Scarecrow. Because even last season, Penny was like, changing one robot is one thing. Changing two, like that can't be just a coincidence. There's something more to this. You are, because he tried to talk one of the main robot that attacked the Resolute down, but he couldn't. He thought it was stupid, but it's like Penny was like, no, like there's something more to it. Don't doubt yourself. But in this moment, they're able to talk to their mom, and she's like, "Oh, how's it?" You're hearing their dad's voice and everything. And it's like, "Well, actually, we didn't make it to Alpha Centauri." It's like, "What? We kind of got sidetracked for a year." And it's like, "Oh, what are you guys up to?" It's like, because the whole reason why this happened is because Scarecrow was trying to help because Robot had reached out to him, but there was a miscommunication. They couldn't communicate with him. So the robot was trying to stop. The danger wasn't that the family was in danger. They were in danger of hurting Scarecrow, who's here to help. So he helped bridge that. And even then, like, her mom being like, "Oh my God, I love the story. Like, I read your book like 5 times. I mean, to be fair, it's been like a year." And, it's like, "Oh, I miss you." And they like, she hugs Robot, and then Scarecrow hugs Maureen, and it's kind of this weird thing of like, "Oh man, this is kind of weird." But it's like, wow, this is pretty dope. So obviously Maureen warns about like, right, SARS still being alive. He might be able to track you and stuff like that. Because like the moment you use the engine, turn it off immediately once you get to Alpha Centauri, because we don't want the robots being able to track you, because they are going to be looking for you, Will. So at the end of it all, it's like, right, it's like, yeah, Judy's off captaining, so we're not going to let mom and dad just going to worry more. So it's like, yeah, send Penny on her way. And then I love, like, when it was all said and done, now, like, it eases everyone, because now, the kids can report back and be like, yeah, like, yeah, our parents are okay, everything's good, they're trying to find their way to Alpha Centauri. But also, like, it eased Maureen and John. Now they know, like, no, the kids are okay. It's having that confirmation is what gets them going, and like, no, this is what we need. It's like, right, we got the robot, and now all we need to do is get the engine. So, but back to Will and the robot. You have Dr. Smith being like, huh. It's like, right, that programming in you, all the good stuff that your mom instilled upon you. It's like, oh, think about it. It's kind of a good thing we stayed here this year time. And he was like, what do you mean? It's like, well, it all worked out. Like, if we had been stranded here like this entire year, you might not have ever been able to talk to your parents and let them know you're okay and know that they're okay. She's like, so she just comes at it from a very optimistic point of view of like, everything kind of works out in its own way. A part of that conversation I forgot to talk about was like, oh yeah, you had Smith being like, you did just happen to forget to mention I was here to your parents. Now, one part of it is, well, right, because you don't want them to know I was a stowaway, and obviously how complicated that would be, because it's like, oh, you stowed away, and you knew like only the kids have to be there, and you're making their oxygen situation complicated because it was accounted just for the children and stuff like that. But also, you didn't want to worry your parents by having them let them know that you were here alone with me. And it's like, huh. And Will's like, interesting theory. And she's like, and she basically just saying at the end of the day, you're a good kid, Will, and just saying that the byproduct of like this is all a byproduct of the good-natured stuff that, Maureen kind of instilled in him, kind of that's his original programming and stuff like that. So I forgot that was kind of the like what started that whole aspect of the conversation. Which Will then turns to the robots like, you did this to help because you felt sorry, because he's like the one that did strand him here for so long, because he was trying to help Will, but I think in grand scheme of things, this is his way to kind of make it up, and so. But now the question is like, do the rest of the robots know that the rest of their species, their makers are gone, that their instinct? And the robot's like, no. And Will thinks, right, all of the robots are going by on some old programming, obsolete programming. The reason why they're in kind of attack mode and doing all they're doing is because they're going by the code, that their creators had instilled them. But like, it's no longer necessary because their creators are gone. Because they probably were meant to be like defenders or attackers, like to protect that species, but now they're gone. It's like, because I always kind of had an inkling that this series will end with pretty much every family getting their own robot and protector type of thing. Like, it's going to be like a collaborations between humans and robot species. I figured that would be kind of the end result. And it's like, oh, every family gets their own robot type of thing. And maybe not. We'll see. But at the very least, the robots could be helpful in getting the rest of humanity off of Earth when the time comes. So I'm getting the inkling there, but Will kind of made it clear of like, right. He's like, we need to get rid of that old programming. He's like, do you think if Saw remembers me? And so we do see like one of the robots took what essentially looks like the core of who Saw is, like essentially kind of their equivalency of like their memories, their soul, everything that they are. It's essentially it's like the I guess SD card that is everything that is him, and just put it in a new body. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I mean, them being machines, that kind of makes sense, but it's interesting to know that they can do that. And so the Saw wakes up and is like, find Will Robinson. It's like, oh yeah, he remembers you all right. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode with all of these discoveries and developments, especially because they're so close to getting all that they need to get off this planet. So because what I was looking up, it seems like this show was always originally planned to be like a trilogy. So that's why I'm also, because I was like, did they change that last minute because it's the final season? And I was like, they probably already had that intentionally planned because they were more so aiming for like a trilogy. It was always kind of meant to be 3 seasons, so they probably never planned. But I'm assuming we're going to dive into the past to some extent, or maybe they'll leave it at that. Like the species who made, like, you were made, but we're not going to go into that too much because your creators are all dead anyway. So I'm curious to see like whether there is anything else of that. Probably not, just because it's like there's already so much else happening already. They probably don't want to add that on top of it, so that's probably why they made it. Yep, there's species extinct. So once again, you're all going by obsolete programming that no longer applies because your creators are no longer around. So I am just so curious to see how this all plays out going forward into the next episode when everyone meets up. It's like Judy's like, hey guys, this is my biological dad. These are my my brother and my sister, and like, so it's definitely gonna be interesting to see what happens next, especially because Smith is gonna bring up, so we're back to that whole oxygen situation we got to keep in mind. So we'll see, but really that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.